Welcome to today's video. Today I want to talk to you about my healing journey and a couple of things that maybe if I did it again, I would do differently. I think hindsight is 2020 and it's really easy to look back and see the mistakes very clearly. But obviously, if you're going through a healing journey, the only way you really figure it out is by trying. And when things work, you keep doing them and you do more of them. And when things don't work, then you stop doing them. And I wish there was a more scientific formula for how healing actually works, but honestly, underneath everything, it really is just trial and error. However, I've achieved pretty miraculous outcome. I'll stick a couple of pictures up on the screen just so you kind of have an idea of what I'm talking about. So just contextually, so you know what's happening in these pictures. At my worst, I was disabled. I was on maximum rate disability benefits in the United Kingdom. My dad was paid to be my full-time carer. I could just about wipe my own ass, but that's pretty much all I could do. I couldn't cook for myself. I found it really hard to keep on top of my own personal hygiene. I definitely couldn't do things like go grocery shopping and things like that. If it wasn't for external support, I would not have been able to survive. I had an enormous list of different symptoms that I would experience on a daily basis. And while these things fluctuated over the years of healing, some of the biggest and most predominant were chronic fatigue syndrome, adrenal fatigue, severe digestive problems. You know, we're talking really living on a restricted diet of about 5 foods for about 5 years. So the magnitude of the restriction due to these severe digestive problems was extremely high. Throw on top of this anxiety, depression, suicidality. We've got histamine intolerance and mast cell activation syndrome, which do come with these kinds of gut problems. Mold toxicity was one of the biggest causes. So you have all the symptoms of that in there. Many autoimmune problems, including Sjogren's syndrome, some autoimmune arthritis. Honestly, the list of things that I didn't have, probably way shorter than the things that I actually did have. And to give you some context of where I'm at now, I'm definitely still not 100%. And that's actually a whole topic for another video. I really want to cover how difficult it is to be a health practitioner and not have perfect health. I mean, nobody actually does. It's just an illusion. But honestly, it's really hard to compare where I've been to where I am because they're just so different. So I don't have chronic fatigue syndrome anymore. I really characterize chronic fatigue syndrome as this post-exercise fatigue. And by that, I mean, exercise was as simple as trying to wash some dishes at the sink. My calves would cramp. They would become full of acid. And it would literally feel like I walked up a mountain or something just from leaning over the sink to wash the dishes. So now I can go to the gym, 2-3 times a week. Maybe I don't have the best recovery of anyone I've ever met, but I'm not doing bad for myself. And I'm definitely not experiencing chronic fatigue. My gut is also still not perfect. There's still a bit of chronic gastritis that I'm working on. I do suspect that there is somewhat of an emotional root cause to this, and we will get into that in the video. But what's most important for me is the fact that I've gone from being severely constipated, I would have one extremely uncomfortable bloody bowel movement a week to I'm now having daily bowel movements without any problems. Also, my dietary diversity and my food sensitivity. Again, it's really hard to even make a comparison. It's gone from really a restricted diet of about 5 or 6 foods for 5 years to now I can eat fairly unrestricted. I am still slightly sensitive to higher quantities of more fibrous foods. So for example, if I were to have big raw salad with nuts and seeds, and I did that like twice in one day, my digestive system probably would not be feeling so good. But generally, I can eat a little bit of raw vegetables now. I can have some fermented foods. I can have some nuts and seeds. And these are the things that are most difficult for me. If we're talking other things that other people find difficult, I have no problems at all. Like I can eat dairy products, no problem. I can eat gluten, no problem whatsoever. I actually feel great. I can eat all the starchy vegetables. I can eat meat, absolutely no issue. I can eat fats with absolutely no problem. Overall, my digestion is like 0 to 100. It's like there's no comparison. And I would say also the autoimmune situation is easily 80 to 90% better. So as far as the Sjogren's syndrome is concerned, constipation isn't an element of that anymore, but I do get a bit of dryness in my eyes. And I notice that this does get exacerbated around microbiome interventions like probiotics and fermented. So I know there's still work to do, but this is a marathon, not a sprint. And I've already come so far. So anyway, now you have the context. You understand where I've been and where I am now. I want to talk to you about what I would do differently. And looking back, if I had been able to do these things, I think I may have been able to heal, maybe get to this level of progress that I have now and shave about probably 1.5 to 2 years off of my journey. Now, it's really hard to say because this is all in theory, When I look back, there's no way I could have done it better. Considering what I knew and the circumstances I was in, it's really hard to change a situation where you really feel powerless and you can't even rely or depend on your own body just to give you like basic energy to function in the day. But still, maybe you can learn from some of my, I wouldn't say regrets, but some of the things that I thought about how I would do differently. Maybe you can learn from them and maybe shave a couple of years off of your healing journey. So the first thing that I would have done differently is I would have had a better understanding of root cause, what my root causes were and how the concept of root cause works. So what root cause is the initial instigating factor that causes you to develop the health problems that you have. This isn't always a clean-cut case. For some people, it's just like one root cause and then everything spirals out from there. For me, I actually had 5 root causes. And if I could go back to the day where I was really starting to get sick and I could have just magically given myself a gift of understanding the concept of root cause and what all of my 5 root causes were, I would have taken a very different trajectory on my healing journey. So I'll share these with you because they might be interesting or maybe even helpful for you. So first of all, the first root cause was trauma. So this is trauma at the time in the home or family environment that I had. This was also childhood trauma. It kind of all blurs in together. It's all one and the same thing. But I'm just going to give it as one collective root cause, trauma. Second was mold exposure. The house that I was living in had severe water damage. So severe to the point that the thought of doing mold testing was absolutely ridiculous. That it was not necessary. We had 2 separate leaks, one in the bathroom upstairs and one from the kitchen sink. And I think that this actually caused so much damage to the building, it probably actually affected the structural integrity of the building. So that really shows you it was a significant water damage and therefore significant mold exposure. This also happened through one of the most difficult winters of our life. And unfortunately, we didn't have central heating at the time. It broke and we couldn't afford to repair it. So this meant we also had a humidity problem. I can remember sometime in January of the year that this happened. I can't even remember what year it was, but it was sometime after Christmas. I can remember that my wall in front of me where I used to sleep was covered with this textured wallpaper and it had begun to develop mold just from the humidity in my breath as I would exhale during the night. So can you imagine me laying there literally this far away from mold that was growing on the wall? I was breathing onto it and it was breathing all of its mold spores out for me to breathe in. So combine that with the water damage, massive root cause. My third root cause was a nerve subluxation. So I had a trampoline accident, landed on my neck and kind of messed my neck up. I had a subluxation of the vagus nerve. So this controls basically all of your autonomic nervous system. So this is your enteric nervous system, your ability to regulate your motility, produce stomach acid, digestive enzymes, bile. This is your ability to go into that rest and digest. So it controls your heart rate, your breathing. I didn't know anything about alternative medicine at the time. And I just thought basically just hurts when I run. It hurts my shoulder when I run. So I'm just going to stop running. So that was great. But I could have probably saved myself so much hassle if I'd have just gone and got treatment straight after that happened. Again, looking back, it's easy to see how probably spending maybe like 300, 400 pounds going to the right place and getting the right treatment would have saved me thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands and the countless hours. This is what I mean. Like, it's easy to say this looking back, but at the time I had no idea. You know, I was like a 14-year-old kid. What are you going to do? The next root cause, and this is a root cause and a compounding factor. So a compounding factor is something that I consider to be not a root cause, but it's something that is a consequence of the root cause, but becomes such a significantly influencing factor that it almost becomes a root cause in itself. And this was taking pharmaceutical medication. So obviously, if you can imagine all of this kind of mess is going on, I'm starting to develop some health problems. They're not so severe at the time. It's basically just like some twitching in my digestive system, like some spasming and a lot of constipation. At this point, probably going once every 3 days, dry, hard stool. So obviously, what do? I go to the doctor. He gives me medication. He gave me some fiber supplements, which were absolutely useless. And he gave me a medicine called Buscopan. For those of you that maybe have heavy periods and lots of cramping, you might have heard of that because it's also used to help with period cramp. But the way this actually works is it's a neurotoxin. It basically destroys your enteric nervous system. It disables your nerves in your digestive system from being able to function. And as a consequence, my motility in my small intestine was significantly reduced. Sure, the twitching kind of sensation went away, but this caused a lot of problems. This gave me massive anxiety. I ended up developing panic attacks as a consequence of this. And the damage that it did to my motility in my small intestine was significant enough for me to consider it a root cause. And finally, we have poor diet. So I never really had a great diet. Basically, my whole life, it was standard Western diet, not super high in nutrient density, quite high in like fine sugar and vegetable oils, and let's say just generally overall suboptimal. But as my symptoms started to get worse, I tried to go vegan. And this was a terrible decision. I'll be the first person to say that you can do a vegan diet well and you can do it poorly. And I definitely did it poorly. And while I'm not an advocate of veganism in general, the kind of vegan diet I was doing was absolutely just trash. It was terrible. I didn't know how to soak and sprout nuts and seeds and stuff. I wasn't covering my B12. I wasn't getting enough protein. It was just terrible. So there's definitely a better way to do vegan than I did. I still don't encourage it. I still wouldn't recommend a vegan diet for healing generally, but I definitely didn't do the best way. But this created like B12 deficiency, all of these things together. If you bring all of these 5 root cause factors in together, that was my perfect storm that created the disease situation that I then kind of had to go through. So if I magically could have just been given the gift of knowing exactly what my root causes were, that would have significantly changed my approach. But I also want to make this video helpful for you. So if you're at this point in your journey and you're still not really clear on what your root cause is, I really encourage you to figure it out. If you want a little bit of help with doing that, you can consider booking in a consultation with me. One of the consultations I offer is literally called a root cause consultation. The reason I offer this consultation is having this information significantly influences every single decision that you're going to make in your whole healing journey. Even the things that I'm doing for my health today are significantly influenced by my awareness of what my root causes are. So if you're still not certain on what it is, or if you think maybe there is a root cause that you haven't become fully aware of and you want some help in figuring out what that is and building a plan to address it, book in a consultation with me. I promise it will be really helpful. Regardless of whether you book or not, I'm going to try and make every single other point on this list that I go through useful and practical to your situation. So I'm going to share what I would have done differently and how you can apply this knowledge to your situation. So the first thing, other than obviously becoming aware of my root causes, that I would have done, the first practical change I would have implemented is I would have changed my environment sooner. And the reason for this is twofold. The first is obviously the mold exposure. There's no way you can be a healthy person in a sick building. It just simply doesn't work. And whilst some people are more susceptible to it than others, maybe you have the HLA gene, maybe you just have a weaker immunity, or you have a gut microbiome that's more predisposed to being vulnerable to mycotoxins. Whatever it is, being exposed to mold chronically is really bad for your health. So from that angle, I definitely would have moved. But also, the family dynamic that I had was really not supportive of my health. Now, I'm not going to go into details into why specifically this was, but it's really important that you have an environment that you're able to feel safe in, that you're able to truly become the version of yourself that you want to be in. And if your environment isn't supportive of you doing this, it's going to make it much more challenging to heal. Now, I know how this sounds because I knew that I needed to change my environment for about 4 years before I was actually able to truly change it. The thing is, when you're at this time, I was like 17, 18 years old, I was basically still a kid. I'd never really worked a day in my life. I didn't know how money worked. I didn't have resources of my own. And I know what it can be like when you become really debilitated by your chronic health symptoms. It makes it really hard for you to make big changes in your life like this. And I think one thing that in the past I've actually got a little bit of hate for is saying you just need to change your environment, when contextually there are people that find it really hard to do that. The thing is, I have to tell you what you need to hear if you want your situation to change. And if I could go back and there's only one change that I could make, it would be this one. It would be to change the environment sooner. So I was able to leave my extremely water damaged building and move into a second, still water damaged, but significantly less water damaged building. I was able to find a little bit more stability here, but I didn't really make much progress towards recovery. It was only once I completely left this environment. So for me, I left England, I left living with my family, I left all of the mold and water damaged buildings, and I also left all of the things that I'd had from those environments, like furniture and clothes and things like that. I left all of those things behind and I moved to a completely different dynamic. So I went from living with my family, my father and my brother, to living with my girlfriend at the time, now wife. I moved country. I went from England to Portugal. Big change in climate made a really big difference for my health as well. When I think back, I don't know how I could have actually made this happen any sooner. But with what I know, that is the one change that would have made biggest difference. Next, I want to talk to you about a couple of things I actually think I did really well. So it's all well and good to look back and see all of your mistakes. But what's also really important is to look at where you did really well. So for me, some of the things that made the most difference for me in a positive way was really about education and self-learning. So if you're watching this now, I can say that all of the research that I did in understanding food science, understanding nutrition, learning how my body works, how my digestive system works, all of these insights that I've gained are the foundation for everything that I've achieved in my healing so far. Not only that, it gives me a really unique angle as a practitioner to help other individuals. Because the way that I've gone through this is all self-taught. So I've learned what really makes the difference. I also think things that I learned about the microbiome and my utilization of probiotics was a fundamental part of my recovery. And you can probably see that mirrored in the content that I produce, where about half of my videos are talking about the gut and probiotics, because they really are so important. I also think the paths that I took down the therapy route, so working on the emotional root cause, I think I did this in a really good way, kind of by accident, which actually brings me really nicely onto the next point that I wanted to cover. The next thing that I would have done slightly differently. And that is that I would have worked on the emotional root cause sooner. Now, I'll be the first person to say, and this is actually generally how I work in coaching programs. We need to make sure we have a strong physiological base before we work on the emotional root cause. It's really hard to dip your toe into the uncertainty of trauma when you've got a biochemistry that's all over the place. If your microbiome's out of balance, if you have vitamin and mineral deficiencies, if you're basically living in an active state of crisis, voluntarily choosing more chaos and uncertainty it just simply isn't going to work. Your body's not going to want to go there. So it is important that we build a nice physiological base of safety, of stability in your symptoms first. But as soon as you've achieved that, you have to work on that emotional root cause. I didn't start addressing the emotional and the trauma aspects of my health situation for about probably a year and a half after I started to see some stability, some balance coming back to my life. And this is definitely one of my regrets. Even though at the time, financially, I was in a very terrible situation. So for context, I was actually getting a discounted rate from my therapist. And I was, even with that, still only able to go once every 6 or 8 weeks. So this is literally like 6 therapy sessions a year. But this is the thing. You do the best you can with what you've got. You just have to take the situation and do the best you can with it. And that's what that looked like to me. And even though it was very slow, and even though it was delayed, I really should have been doing it sooner, that played a fundamental role in my recovery from my health situation. So if you're at the point where, like I was at the time, where you've done a lot of physical things, you've learned a lot about the microbiome, about the gut, like the things I was just talking about previously, like food science, nutrition, things like that. If you've managed to achieve some stability, but you're just not really moving forward at the pace that you think you should be able to, and you're not working on any of these like emotional root cause stuff, you definitely should. Now, the path that I took, I actually think was probably the best path I could have taken. And if you feel like you're resonating with kind of what I've been talking about so far, it might be a path that works well for you as well. So I started out with somatic therapies. So these are therapies where you're working based in your body and your bodily sensations. I've personally found that talk therapies like CBT and psychotherapy, they're kind of not really that helpful, because at the level of trauma that you're experiencing, where it's manifesting as a physical health problem, all of the answers that you need are actually inside of your body, not inside of your mind. And this is why people with chronic health problems that are referred to like CBT specialists, psychotherapists, they think therapy is kind of useless and not helpful, because they're saying, yeah, of course I'm depressed. Have you seen the state of my body? Like, I have 5 autoimmune conditions. Of course I have depression. Or I'm trying to juggle a schedule of 15 doctor's appointments a week. Of course I have anxiety. The thing is, we're looking at this from a different angle. Instead of talking about the emotions that you're feeling, we're actually looking in your body. We're feeling into these physical sensations, and we're allowing trauma loops to complete. We're allowing the wisdom of the body, where the trauma is actually held, to walk through, process, and let go of that trauma. From there, I started doing something called family constellations. So this is more of a heady, you can kind of think psychotherapy, CBT kind of style of therapy, but you're working a lot with the subconscious. The practitioner is using tools and techniques to help you see how you see your family dynamic. And then they're able to correct your perception of your family dynamic to see how it actually is, instead of how you have perceived it up until this point in time. For me, there were so many breakthroughs in this. Many of my breakthroughs with regards to food sensitivities were as a consequence of the family constellations work that I did. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. When we're growing up as children, we take the experience that we have personally and we model the whole rest of our lives based on what we experienced in childhood. And this is why people go through their life and repeat the patterns over and over and over again, is because they're constellating according to the dynamic of their upbringing. If we can change the way you understand your upbringing, we can change the way that you understand how to constellate a situation. You show up differently and the situation is completely different. So for me, doing this kind of work not only significantly changed my health outcomes, but it also made a really big difference with my relationship with other people. It changed my relationship with money. It was a really effective modality for me, and I really like it. So I think that the combination of these two modalities was accidentally one of the best things that I ever did. The next thing I would have done differently is kind of a change in philosophy of the approach to healing. And again, it's basically impossible to apply it back then because I was a different person then. I didn't have the experience and know what I know now back then. However, the mindset that I have now around healing and how healing works is completely different to the mindset that I had at that time. And if I could have had that mindset then, it would have completely changed my healing trajectory. I would have made very different decisions. So I've tried to think about what my mindset was then and what it is now, and try to compare them so that I could share them in a way that's helpful for you. So hopefully I can help you make that shift from maybe where I was and maybe where you are now to what my mindset is now, or something closer to that. So previously my approach was very desperate. There was a heavy emphasis on trial and error. I think that that's okay. However, the energy of this trial and error was very desperate. It was like, what's the next thing going to do that's going to take my life from being like a -10 to a +5? I was always looking for this like one thing that was just going to change everything. And this meant that I would do honestly pretty extreme things. And these things actually created several problems for me. Like one time I took like 200 grams of vitamin C in one go. And that very nearly ended up in a trip to the hospital. That was really not the smartest decision. However, I was desperate, and that's what you do when you're desperate. Another time, I also took 10 capsules of betaine HCl in one go. And I believe this is actually where my gastritis started. This is where my gastritis problems began. but I did it because I was desperate. I think the best way I can explain the shift in mindset is to think about the structures of some buildings. Think about a skyscraper. It has a very small foundation, and then you build on it and it goes extremely tall. The height is extremely high compared to the surface area of the base of the building. If you compare this structure to the structure of a pyramid, pyramids can be very, very tall, but they have a very large base. They have a very solid foundation. What I was trying to do was build a skyscraper. I was trying to have a very small foundation. I didn't want to work on building a larger foundation. I just wanted it to grow really, really fast. I just wanted to make it really, really tall as quickly as I could. Whereas looking back, what I should have done is spend as much time as I can building that foundation out. Because even though it means that the height, sort of like the progress, the results that you get might feel slower, you're building them on a solid foundation that you're never going to lose. And this is kind of how I approach healing now. I'm always trying to build the base even bigger. I'm trying to make the foundation even stronger. And kind of as a consequence, the things that you build in it, you can build them way quicker and you never lose them. You never lose progress. I hear about people all the time having like big healing breakthroughs and then having massive setbacks. And I'm not saying I've never had a setback, but the magnitude of my setbacks have always been very small. Like I've never lost more than maybe like 5 or 10% of my progress in one go. Whereas I hear of some people that have full-on flare-ups and they go all the way back to the starting point. And this is because they're building skyscrapers and they don't have a strong foundation. Whereas I've built a pyramid, and even if I have a massive earthquake, very little crumbles off the top. This kind of ties in really nicely to my next point, which is where I took antibiotics for SIBO. So this again was me looking for this kind of quick fix, this let's just build the skyscraper really tall. I was like, okay, I have a bacterial overgrowth, take antibiotics, problem solved. That was my mindset that I had at the time. This was actually one of the worst decisions I ever made. Not only did it make my digestive symptoms way worse, as in my going for a bowel movement once every 3 days, turning into once every 7 days. And this was really where the onset of my food sensitivities really began. This is when histamine intolerance started to appear. This is where I became really intolerant to FODMAPs. Not only is all of that true, this is also what caused me to develop chronic fatigue syndrome. I can very clearly remember in my head the week before my antibiotic treatment and the week after my antibiotic treatment. And I knew I'd made a mistake. I knew something was wrong. So trying to build the skyscraper, I just saw SIBO, took antibiotics. That was like what I thought made sense. And again, the only reason I have the knowledge now is I went through this and this is what I did. But with this experience, with this knowledge, what I can say now is SIBO is a very complicated situation. It's not just as simple as you have too many bacteria in the intestine, you should kill it. There are so many variables that go into it. You have to look at motility. You have to look at stomach acid and digestive enzymes. You have to look at the quality of your bile. You have to look at your toxicity level. You have to look at your immune system. There are so many things that go into it. And building my gut back up from doing those antibiotics on top of all the mold has made my healing journey that much longer. And this is why, even though I've made so much progress, I still have a long way to go. Because with the things that I tried to do in the beginning, I actually set myself back really, really far. And maybe I've got a little bit ahead of myself here because this point I really should have given you earlier in the video. And this point was to stop listening to doctors. Now, I'll be the first person to say anything I say in these videos is not medical advice. I also have to say that because YouTube are developing artificial intelligence algorithms that go over videos and they look for what they believe videos talking about medical advice that go against the mainstream narrative, and they remove these videos. We've received warnings, we've had videos removed. So I can't tell you to stop listening to your doctors, but what I can tell you is if I went back and did it again, I would have stopped listening to my doctors way quicker. Did you know one of the best ways that you can stop censorship of alternative medicine is by liking and sharing this video? If the algorithm doesn't like it and it feels like it can delete it, it will. But if it doesn't feel like it can delete it, it will just stop showing it to people. It will stop putting it in people's feeds. And the only way we can beat this is by you finding quality information that you connect with and you resonate with. And if you've come this far, you clearly have some kind of connection with the content that I'm creating. And I'm telling you, it's really hard to get this information in the hands of the people that needs it. So if you know anyone that would benefit from this, please copy the link and just send it to them, because I promise you the YouTube algorithm isn't going to do it. So anyway, I would have stopped listening to my doctors sooner. I can remember when I went to my gastroenterologist, I told him that I was extremely constipated. I was having bloody bowel movements and that I'd started the GAPS diet because at this point I'd finally decided, okay, I have to do something about this. He said he wanted to test me for celiac disease. And in order to test me for celiac disease, I had to start eating gluten again. And I thought, well, he's the doctor, right? He knows what he's talking about. So on the way home, we bought bread, we bought pasta, we bought some biscuits, and I started eating gluten again. And literally within 5 days, I'm horrendously constipated and I'm having bloody bowel movements again. I'd managed to get them under control with the GAPS diet, but the doctor said I needed to do it, so I did it. And when I just saw a toilet bowl just completely full of blood, I just thought, what the hell is the doctor telling me to do? This makes absolutely no sense. I'm not doing this anymore. This is stupid. And from that point, I really became my own health advocate. And I put my opinion or what I believe to be the right thing for me above what anybody else had to say, including doctors. And I have to say that one decision alone completely changed my healing trajectory. The final thing I want to give you today, the final thing that I would have done differently and that you have the opportunity to do differently is to implement the principles of the Goldilocks. The Goldilocks zone is something I discovered through quite literally years of suffering. For the longest time, I thought that because I was suffering, because I was using a treatment that was making me feel worse, that it was working and that I would feel better in the long run. And I've since come to realize that that just simply isn't true. Healing has a very gentle energy to it. Healing is very nourishing and loving and kind, is gentle and soft. And if you find yourself constantly doing things that make you feel worse because you believe that doing so is going to make you feel better in the long run, you've completely missed the whole point of what healing is. Instead, try to apply the Goldilocks zone principle. What this looks like is do things according to what your body says your tolerance limit is. So if you're looking at probiotics, for example, and I personally believe that probiotics are a really important part of healing just about anything, but especially digestive problems. If you take a probiotic and it makes you extremely gassy, extremely constipated, you probably took too much and you need to start on a smaller dose. You need to take enough that it's going to have an impact, but not so much that it gives you significantly adverse symptoms. The adverse symptoms are indicators that your body is not handling the shift. It's an indicator that you're pushing your body too far out of its comfort zone. And when you do this, you're putting the body into a state of crisis. You're forcing it to deal with what you're making it deal with instead of allowing it to do what it wants. And the thing is, your body is what heals itself. Your body is what does all the healing. And if you're constantly like forcing it to do things that it doesn't actually want to be doing, you're consistently holding yourself out of a healing energy. You literally, with your implementations, with the things that you're doing in the name of healing, become the things that stop you from attaining that healing. Because your body wants to heal. It wants to self-regulate. It wants to put itself back together. And it knows exactly how to do it. We just need to create the right environment and do it in a gentle way. I can remember for about a year and a half, I was consistently taking probiotics at a dose that was actually way too high for me. And for that year and a half, I had to deal with severe depression, anxiety, horrible digestive problems. And I just simply wasn't doing it right. It is true that this actually benefited me in the long run. However, I could have had all of those benefits and way less of that pain. Like not even half, maybe 1/20th of the pain if I just not pushed the dose so high. If I just stayed a little bit closer to what my body was able to tolerate instead of pushing for insane progress. Again, doing the skyscraper versus the pyramid. I was pushing too hard and too fast and I created a lot of my own suffering. So find a way to move forward slowly and methodically and not in this rush, because the rush is actually going to slow you down. Slow and steady wins the race. You've heard the story because this is a fundamental principle that is true. Stop rushing and stop running around and trying to do it in this chaotic, frantic way, and do it slow, do it steady, and do it methodically. Looking back, I can say I would do all of these things differently, but honestly, I couldn't. It just simply wouldn't work. The reason I have the insights, the reason I can look back and say that I would do all these things differently is because I've grown so much as a person, and I've only done that as a consequence of doing all of these things wrong. So my bonus takeaway would be literally just take the step that's in front of you. Just continue walking forward. As you keep walking, you will improve your ability to make better decisions. You will learn more. You will gain more information. And if you're doing it in a methodical way, you're building up this pyramid of results that you're never going to lose. You're building this really solid foundation and nothing's going to be able to take that away from you. So they're the things that I would do differently. I hope that you can learn from my mistakes. And I hope that this helps to boost your healing journey along a little. Let me know if you relate with any of these. Do you feel like you've struggled with the same point? And also, if I've given you a piece of wisdom today that has really sort of hit home and you feel like I was really talking to you with the point that I was making and you can really empathize and feel, oh, this is actually the exact struggle that I'm going through right now, be sure to let me know and leave me a comment below. I'd be really interested to hear about where you are in your healing journey, because probably a couple of miles to walk yet. So if you made it this far, thanks for watching. I really hope you found this helpful and you'd learned something, and I'd really love to see your comment below. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.